Our next speaker comes to us from, apparently there's another institution of higher ed in Colorado besides CMU, CU Boulder. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Brian Lewandowski, who's with the CU Boulder Leeds School of Business, to drill it down to Colorado, talk about the economic contribution of oil and gas in Colorado. Join me in welcoming Brian.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Sue, for your comments. You really set up what I'm going to talk about very well. So I am with the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado Boulder. We have a research center there, and we primarily study the Colorado economy. For the past 6 years, I've also studied Colorado's energy economy. We started out by doing a couple of papers for the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. Last year we finished a paper for the American Petroleum Institute that I think you may be interested in because we do a county by county economic impact where we quantify jobs and we also quantify wages and taxes to some extent. But today what I'm going to do is really give a very high level overview of the Colorado economy, talk about Colorado's energy economy, and then talk about what the price impact could mean for economic growth in Colorado. So this is a map of employment from peak employment. Before the recession started back in 2008 is really when employment started to turn nationally. Colorado has been one of the best recovery states in the nation. In fact, we're the third best behind North Dakota and Texas. And I'm going to argue that a lot of this has to do with this energy boom that we've really experienced in the eastern half of the state. So right now we're about 6%, a little over 6% above our previous peak employment levels back in 2008. But this hasn't been shared evenly across Colorado. So unfortunately, places like Grand Junction metropolitan area and the Colorado Springs metropolitan area, they've really lagged the rest of the state, while areas north and east of Denver have outperformed Colorado, and Colorado's outperformed the nation in growth. So why is this? We've had just this incredible energy boom in northeastern Colorado. If you take a look at drilling permits and rig counts, and that's really been the epicenter of production over the past few years, and it's really paid off in terms of investment and jobs. So as these oil producers invest within the local community, there's a lot of jobs that follow, and they're not just concentrated in Weld County, but the surrounding counties really experience a benefit from that as well. So when we take a look at, I indexed mining employment and total employment in Colorado. The reason why I chose mining is because this data comes out much more frequently than the detailed data where I can extract oil and gas. But just as a reference, about 80% of mining employment is oil and gas employment. So what this shows is Colorado entered the recession in about January 2008. We lost about 6.4% of employment, and I mentioned that we're up about 6% now from that previous peak. Commodity prices in 2008 continued to increase until I think it was about August or September. There's people in this room that'll know exactly. But then prices fell dramatically. And the mining industry responded accordingly, and they laid off workers. We trimmed about 20% of our mining employment in the state. So mining really lagged all of Colorado in the employment recession, but then we overshot it. But mining employment actually turned before the rest of the state. So it actually led Colorado out of the recession, and now mining employment is up about 25% from the previous peak, while total employment is up about 6%. So it was one of those catalysts that started to pull Colorado out of the recession. And Colorado led the nation in recovering from the recession. But in terms of other economic metrics, not just employment, we have outperformed the nation in terms of wage growth, personal income growth, home price appreciation, better foreclosure rates. I mean, you can point to almost any economic metric, and Colorado has outperformed the nation. And that area that I talked about, north, Denver, north up to Fort Collins and east out to Greeley, that area of the state has outperformed the rest of Colorado. So unfortunately, the western slope Colorado, don't mean to touch on a dismal note, but western Colorado has really been stagnant in terms of the recovery from the recession. And it just seems that we can't really get traction when it comes to rebuilding the economy that we lost from the recession. Okay, so this shows home price appreciation. This touches on what I just mentioned, but again, Greeley, Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, all have higher home price appreciation than the rest of the state and the nation. So this is Colorado oil production. This is almost an exponential curve. We had almost 94 million barrels of oil produced in 2014. Okay, the differential from 2013 to 2014, 28.5 million barrels. Go back to 2007 and prior, that's all of our production of oil in those prior years. We grew our oil production by that much in a single year in 2014. Natural gas production, we're off about 9% or so from our peak in 2011, but we're still at really incredible levels of natural gas production in Colorado. But when we look at where this activity is concentrated, I mean, it's really no secret in this room. It's in two counties where we have most of our drilling permits, Weld County and Garfield County. Okay, so that's about 80% of our permits. And then look how it drops off from there. There's almost no activity once you get past the first 5 counties. When I did this study last year for the American Petroleum Institute, I really tried to quantify where this activity is concentrated around Colorado. I looked at the Department of Local Affairs property tax data and found that 88% of taxable production occurs in 5 counties in Colorado: Weld, Rio Blanco, Garfield, Montezuma, and La Plata. Okay? Another 33 counties account for the remaining 12% of production, and then 26 counties effectively have 0 taxable production in Colorado. But when you take a look at the distribution of employment across Colorado, it's much more diversified. The top 5 producing counties account for about 40% of employment. The other 33 small producing counties account for 30% of employment. And then those counties with 0 production have the remaining 30% of employment. So where do you think the greatest number of oil and gas workers resides in Colorado? Any guesses? In Denver, in the city and county of Denver, okay? The second concentration is Weld County. So when we were looking at this, the question really was, why are there so many jobs in Denver? And then I looked at the occupational statistics for the oil and gas industry. And about 40% of the jobs in the industry nationally are in what we would think of as the office jobs. So these are finance jobs, management, accounting, engineering, and they've concentrated that activity in Denver. But then we see the production jobs really occur where the wellheads are, where the drilling is. And so we see those jobs concentrated around Weld County and then out in western Colorado. So I'm sure you'll probably see this slide a few times over the next couple days, but this is commercial crude oil storage. Okay, this is excluding the strategic reserves nationally, and we have never seen, this data goes back to 1982. In this data set, we've never seen a faster spike in oil reserves nationally. So this is one of the primary reasons why we see the downward pressure on price, and I think this is one of the greatest reasons why we won't see a really quick snapback in oil prices. When we take a look at oil, I like to look at these numbers year over year. So April 21st, the spot price was just over $55. That's about half where it was April 21st, 2014. Okay, this is about 38% below the 5-year average WTI spot price. When we take a look at the Henry Hub gas spot price, I don't hear this talked about as much, but prices are down dramatically for the natural gas price as well. So I use the weekly price because the daily price is a lot more volatile for gas. 261 as of April 17. It was 425 a year ago. So dramatic decreases in prices, and this impacts investment and employment in our Colorado economy. The benefit that we see at the pump, we've started to see prices creep back up. We're still at, these are Colorado averages, 246 as of April 27. It was 390 a year ago. But when we've done our analysis on this, we find that the price impact, the price benefit from gasoline prices is far overshadowed from the detriment to the decrease, from the decrease in investment in the state. So there's a paper out there, I don't know if any of you saw this, the Dallas Fed published a paper by Monet Usul and Stephen A. Brown, and it just came out in April 2015, and they were saying that Colorado would benefit from lower oil prices. But I looked at the data, and they actually republished a paper from 2013, and it was using data, I think the data was from 2011. But think of how much different Colorado's energy economy is from 2011 to now. I showed you how much more oil production we've had, and all of that investment that's come into the state from the oil and gas industry over that time period. I don't think that we can take a look at our energy economy from 2011 and assume that it would have a similar impact today. So this just summarizes the past 3 charts. Early last year, when we were doing a paper on the economic impact of the ballot initiatives, it was about June or so, and we were taking a look at pretty decent year-over-year growth in spot prices. So oil was up, 9, 10%. The natural gas prices were up 20%. Gasoline was down a little bit, but it was fairly stable. And our Baker Hughes rig count was also up. Then as July, August, September rolled around, we started to see this precipitous fall in prices. So oil was down 1%, then 9, 12, 16, 19, 39, 50, and now it's stabilized around 50. But the natural gas prices are down by similar magnitudes. It took a little while longer before we saw gas prices fall, but they're down by similar magnitudes. And then our gasoline price declined. Baker Hughes rig count down 42% from the same period last year. Okay, so that is a really dramatic and steep fall in prices. When we take a look at the comparison or the correlation between price and employment, it's a little fuzzy, but there is a correlation here. I lagged employment by about 6 months or so. And what I found was over the last 3 or 4 price events from 1990 forward, because that's the period that we have mining employment for, there is downward pressure on employment, but it does lag. And I found that it lags between 6 and 16 months, okay? So if we look back here, 6 months would have been about January. And in February, the employment data shows that we started to see a month-over-month decline in mining employment in Colorado, okay? So we can expect to see, and then it happened again in March, we can expect to see this show up in the data. We hear about it anecdotally, and we read about it in the papers, but we're gonna start to see it hit a little bit harder in the data over the coming months. Over the past 10 years, as we've taken a look at total value of production, this volatility in the value of production doesn't have anything to do with our total production, but it has everything to do with price in Colorado. So think about what we're looking at right now, an environment where our total value of production will be cut in half because prices are down so much right now. But that's not going to show up in the data for about another year. And then think about what that does for our public revenue stream. A couple of our past papers demonstrate that that revenue stream to Colorado communities, from the state down to counties and cities and school districts and special districts, this adds up to over $1 billion. And severance taxes is a huge piece of this. Over the past 12 months, the rolling sum has been about $330 million in severance taxes alone. But think about what happens as the value of what we're producing in Colorado is cut in half. That's going to cut deeply into this public revenue stream. That includes sales taxes and income taxes and severance taxes. And then these other revenue streams for land leases and bonuses, what happens to those as we are renewing and leasing up land if there isn't any demand or little demand for new production. So what I did here is overlaid the 12-month average WTI spot price with severance taxes. And you can see the correlation there, and you can see the lag effect. So here's a turning point in price, and you can see a little bit of a turning point in severance taxes right up top. I take a look at the 12-month rolling sum because severance taxes are extremely volatile. They can be up, for a single month, they could be up 100% year over year, or they could be down 30% year over year. So taking a look at the 12-month rolling sum really smooths this data out. So I mentioned that last year we took a look at the impact of the ballot initiatives. I run the REMI model for the Common Sense Policy Roundtable for the Denver Metro EDC and for Denver South EDP. And it was after what would that have been, the 2013 election. We saw some fracking moratoriums in Colorado, mostly along the Front Range, places like Lafayette and Broomfield. And our inclination at that point was, well, perhaps we'll see some sort of statewide fracking ban next year in 2014. So we pulled together some data and we ran it through the REMI model to see what that would mean for the Colorado economy. We found that that would be a net negative on the Colorado economy. That shouldn't be a big surprise. But then, as we were progressing through 2014, we saw the ballot initiatives start to take shape. And they really went down two paths, a local control scenario or a setback scenario. So we finished that paper in about September or so, and then prices started to change. And that really shifted the conversation from these legislative impacts to price. So we have another paper that we did in January. But I wanted to talk about the differences between these. And I think that it's important to know that the setback rule restricts production, but it is predictable. So at least your producers know how it'll impact their operations. We know that for those that can produce, it'll increase their cost of production. And they can go to individual landowners and ask for permission or ask for waivers even within the 2,000-foot setback that was being proposed. But we still found that would have a constricting impact on Colorado's production. When we looked at the local control scenario, we didn't have any idea how to really model this because I think it is so unpredictable and there's so much uncertainty out there about how it would impact production. Because this is really at, I don't want to say the whim of the community, but the tide of the community to really restrict production. So we've seen it happen in these metropolitan Front Range communities, but where could it spread to? So I took a look at taxable production along Colorado's metropolitan Front Range, excluding Weld County. Do you know how much taxable production occurs in that area? 1.5% or so. So it's a very little portion of our total taxable production, but that's really our population center of the state. About 2/3 of our population lives within that corridor. So then I thought, well, maybe all cities in Colorado would ban fracking or ban production. And again, that's only about 4.5% of current production in Colorado. So really most of our production, by and large, is in rural areas of the state. But then we took a look at the price impact, and I think that this is really kind of a best scenario out of these three, because the expectation is that prices will come back, and that prices will, in the next few years, be at a level where we can see some increased production return to Colorado. And based on those expectations, I think that's why we had a lagging effect in our job losses in the state, and even a lagging effect in our rig activity, because I think there is some optimism there that prices would even turn a little bit sooner than they have. So we took a look at oil production over the past 40 years. This is from 1970 to 2014. And what we found is there's a pretty steep production decline from when the well is drilled. We see about a 40% decline after year one in oil production and a 14% decline in gas production. And that steep decline smooths out over time, but the important thing to know about that decline curve is that it's important to have new production come in behind your existing production. So if you don't have this pipeline of new activity, you're going to see your total production as a state fall. So not only are we seeing a decline in production because, or a decline in value because price is cut in half, but over the next few years, we have the potential to see an extra decline due to a production decline if we don't have a lot of activity backfilling this existing production in the state. So this is my closing slide here, and I'll just take a look at the impact on Colorado employment. When we ran the decline in oil prices and gas prices through the REMI model, we found that it has about a 1.1 percentage point slowing effect on total employment in Colorado. So this isn't to say that it's a recessionary impact on the state economy or that it causes employment to shrink in the state. It just causes it to grow slower. And we quantified it at about 1.1 percentage points slower. We did a second scenario where we took a look at a greater employment response, just meaning that not only does it have a dramatic effect on industry investment, but it has even a deeper effect on industry employment. And we found that that has a slowing effect of about 1.8 percentage points, which still puts us at about 1.2% employment growth in Colorado for 2015. But it's that multiplier effect, that investment that gets spread around not only within the oil and gas industry, but across all industries in Colorado. Really it's about the same impacts on personal income, 1.1 percentage points. But think about that slowing effect that it has on other industries, including our tourism industry in Colorado. So you're going to have this slide deck. Here's some things that I watched on the very last slide. All of this data is publicly accessible, but if you just want to keep up on what some of these metrics are doing, it's out there. And the other thing I should mention is we do a monthly 2-pager, and we just summarize the current data that we have on the oil and gas industry as it relates to the Colorado economy. If you're interested in that, drop me one of your cards, and I'm happy to put you on that mailing list. Thank you.